Hello. Welcome everyone to the third and last session of the Women in Translation readings as we celebrate Women in Translation Month. My name is Marianne Newman. I translate from Catalan, and I'm here as a representative of the PEN Translation Committee, on which I served as co-chair in the past. Today's event is being hosted by PEN America, and I'm grateful to Alea Gatto, Manager of Membership Engagement for PEN, who is also managing the Zoom. PEN America's commitment to support women's voices in translation builds on the work of blogger Meytal Radzinski, who has successfully advocated to raise awareness of literature by women, queer, and non-binary authors from around the world, whose work has been translated into English. Many thanks to the three co-organizers of this event series, Nancy Naomi Carlson, Esperanza Hope Snyder, and Catherine E. Young, for bringing together today's stellar assemblage of translators and authors. It is my pleasure now to introduce the moderator of today's event, Esperanza Hope Snyder. Assistant Director of Breadloaf in Sicily, co-coordinator of the Lorca Prize, Esperanza is the author of the poetry collection Esperanza and Hope, Sheep Meadow Press, and two plays, Lullaby for George and The Back Room. Her co-translation with Nancy Naomi Carlson of Wendy Guerra's Ropa Interior was noted in the New York Times.
Thank you, Marianne, for that lovely introduction. And I echo all your thanks. I'm so happy to be moderating our last event. Today, we are presenting 5 translators, including emerging translators, along with established ones for real-time bilingual readings from around the globe, representing the following languages: German, Mandarin Chinese, Catalan, Galician, and French. The reading will be followed by a short Q&A session, if time permits. So please submit your questions or any of your comments to the panelists in the comments section, and we'll ask as many as we have time for at the end. Our first group of readers will be translator Sharon Dolin and author Gemma Gorga. Sharon Dolin is the translator of 2 books from Catalan, Book of Minutes and Late to the House of Words, selected poems by Gemma Gorga, shortlisted for the 2022 Griffin Prize. Gemma Gorga has published 7 collections of poetry in Catalan, most recently Mur and Viatge al Centre. She teaches medieval and Renaissance Spanish literature at the University of Barcelona. Welcome, Sharon and Gemma.
Thank you, Esperanza, for moderating this event, and thank you to the other wonderful moderators who also curated this series, along with you, Catherine E. Young and Nancy Naomi Carlson. Thank you also to PEN for hosting this reading series. It's really a pleasure to be here. Gemma Gorga's poems, written in her native Catalan, are always acts of exploration. I love the disarming simplicity each poem deploys as an act of inquiry into questions at times metaphysical, even spiritual, and always into something the poet does not yet know. There is also a romance with individual words themselves, and thus with the dictionary, which you will hear, so that language itself is foregrounded and becomes the prism through which a reader views the world. We're going to read 4 poems from the selected poems, Late to the House of Words, which was just mentioned. And first, Gemma Gorga will read in Catalan, followed by my reading in English translation. Gemma?
Thank you for the invitation. It's a pleasure to be here. So I'm going to read in Catalan this first poem. Digue'm, mirall. Vam fer tard a la casa de les paraules. I ara baixem a les palpentes, escales adolorides com vèrtebres, i busquem entre el que el sobra alguna síl·laba viva, germana del pa i la penúria, per dur-nos als llavis. Com ara un nom de dona, l'os d'un nom de dona, extraviat entre les pedres d'aquests murs que un dia foren habitats, carn endins. I potser un joiell, una capseta, un mirall a qui poder preguntar tantes coses.
Mirror, mirror on the wall. We showed up late to the house of words. Now we grope our way downstairs as painful as vertebrae and search between the wall's plastered shards for some living syllable, sister to bread and poverty to bring to our lips, such as a name, a woman's name, the bone of a woman's name lost between the stones of these walls that once upon a time housed flesh inside, and perhaps a jewel, a little box, a mirror you could ask so many things.
The following one is semàntica i nutrició. Cau la fulla a terra i es descompon en significats menors. Humitat, pigment, làmina, oxigen, escalfor, llum. Com qui lletreja el seu nom sencer a un desconegut. Anhidrit, carbònic. Res no es perd pel camí, ni les converses que ha mantingut amb la pluja de nit, ni les lliçons de vol que li han donat els ocells. Tota ella es descompon en unitats menors, directament assimilables per la paciència de les formigues, les boques callades del bosc. És per això que l'idioma del vent arriba a parlar-se també sota terra. I és per això que els cucs s'emproven ales i surten volant, convertits en papallones. Tot és matèria. Tot es transforma en vol quan una simple fulla cau a terra.
Semantics and nutrition. The leaf falls to the ground and decomposes into smaller meanings: moisture, pigment, lamina, oxygen, heat, light, the way someone spells out their full name to a stranger. Carbon dioxide. Nothing is lost along the way, neither its conversations with the night rain nor flying lessons given by birds. It all decomposes into smaller units directly assimilated by patient ants, the silent mouths of the forest. That's why the language of the wind also comes to be spoken underground. That's why worms try on wings and fly away, turned into butterflies. Everything is matter. Everything is transformed into flight when a simple leaf falls to the ground.
The next one, per ordre alfabètic. Fullejo el diccionari a l'atzar. Qui ha plantat calèndules al costat dels calendaris, lliris als llindars de la pàgina? Es treuen les paraules les sabates per celebrar com cal el sàbat. La tristesa no és tan lluny de les trinxeres, ni la mort del marbre, ni les plomes del plom que les fa caure enllà del significat. Passo els dits pels lloms polsosos del record i busco un criteri que em permeti ordenar el desordre. Voldràs dir-me, sisplau, per quina lletra t'hauré de buscar a tu, tul, tulipa, túmul, turment?
In alphabetical order. I leaf through the dictionary at random. Who has planted calendula next to calendar? Lilies by the lintel of the page. Words shed their shoes as they should to celebrate the Sabbath. Trenchant is not that far away from trenches, nor is mortality from marble, nor leaves from lead, which makes them fall beyond their meaning. I pass my fingers over the dusty spines of memory and search for a rule that lets me order the disorder. Please tell me, under which letter do I need to look for you? Yarrow, yaw, yaw, you. The final U is a Y-E-W, a homophone of the Y-O-U. This is our final poem.
Yes, the last one, de creixement. Aprendre dels crowns, l'art pacífic d'anar enrere. Aprendre a desaprendre, descalçar-se, desviar-se, sorprendre's i de nou sorprendre's. Mirar una poma fins a alliberar-la de la polsina de l'al·legoria. No saber res del que s'ha de saber. Oblidar la retòrica sintètica i la mecànica avorrida de l'àtom. Mirar sense dir, estic mirant. Estimar sense dir, estic estimant. Deixar els versos inacabats. Deixar els versos. Deixar.
Decreation. Learn from crabs the peaceful art of going backwards. Learn to unlearn. Go shoeless. Digress. Surprise yourself yet again. Look at an apple until you liberate it from the fine dust of allegory. Know nothing about what you should know. Forget artificial rhetoric and the boring mechanics of the atom. Look without saying, I am looking. Love without saying, I am loving. Leave verses unfinished. Leave verses. Leave. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you so much, Sharon and Gemma, for this reading, for beginning for us. Our next pair of readers will be translator Henochowicz and author Gülnisa Erdal.
Thank you for the introduction. And I also wanted to say thank you to Professor Andres Guder, Gülnisa's German translator, who is with us today. And I want to just thank PEN America for this opportunity to let Gülnisa and me read to you. Gülnisa and I actually have not yet met in person, but we've been working together now as I translate her novel, and I really consider her a dear friend who's really also inspired me with her writing. At great personal risk, she has written the first literary novel to grapple with the Chinese government's campaign to erase her people and their legacy. This book is called Banu's Redemption, and it tells the story of Banu Babur, a Uyghur woman living in Istanbul who returns home in the thick of the re-education mass detentions of 2017 in order to find her way back to her family and to make good on a promise to a long-lost friend.
Thank you, Anne. Sorry about this, but I'm going to introduce you both.
Oh.
Introduce you both. So that this is perfect. Anne Henochowicz's translations have appeared in Dissent, Cha, Manoa, and the Washington Post. She writes and teaches in the Washington, D.C. area. Gülnisa Erdal is a Uyghur writer and scholar living in exile, as Anne pointed out for us. Her debut novel, Banu's Redemption, has already been translated into French and German. So this is perfect. Go ahead.
Thank you. Sorry, I think I was a little too eager to jump in there. I wanted to talk just a bit about the process and the passage that we're going to be reading from. So I just want to say, as I'm translating, I really feel like I'm reliving everything that this protagonist is going through. And I actually remember a moment this summer when it was when I finished translating the 9th chapter, and I literally felt sick to my stomach. But there's been also some like soaring passages, and I just feel really lucky to be able to inhabit this text and to bring this really urgent novel into English for a broader audience. As for the passage we'll be reading from today, this is from the first chapter. Banu is on a flight to Urumqi, and she's sitting on a plane between two police officers who have intercepted her at customs in Beijing. One of these officers is her longtime minder, Zhang Xiaofang, and the other is this chatty officer who goes by his social media handle, Kebab. Exhausted from her journey, Banu drifts into sleep.
烤肉串的亲切使我的精神松懈下来，进入了昏昏欲睡的状态。过去的2天，我几乎没有合眼，不确定的状态让我十分焦虑不安。无数种可能的情况在我的头脑中像小老鼠一样窜来窜去，令我亢奋不已。4小时20分钟的航程不算太长，但是也足以在睡眠中解除困乏。既然已经像飞虫一样被蜘蛛网粘住，转机去伊犁探望妈妈也极无可能，那就随他们处置吧。这样想着，一阵困意袭来，我渐渐进入了梦乡。
Kebab's friendly banter puts me at ease, and I start to nod off. I haven't closed my eyes in 2 days, kept awake by countless theoretical scenarios scurrying around my head like mice. 4 hours and 20 minutes isn't that long, but it is long enough to take the edge off my fatigue. I'm an insect stuck in a spider's web. It's unlikely that I'll catch my connecting flight to Ili to see my mom anyway. It's all up to them. Sleep overcomes me, and I begin to dream.
天空布满阴霾，挂着刺骨的寒风。我起晚了，因为害怕迟到后的罚站，发疯似的往学校跑。可是学校不在了，那里出现了一个又大又厚的黑铁门，大门紧闭。我想进去，可怎么也推不开。绕着学校的围墙走了一圈，发现已经不可能从礼堂后边那个豁口钻进去了，因为墙更高、更结实了，上面还有铁丝网。墙外的老榆树还在，这使我安下心来。你们休想害我挨 K。我爬上老榆树，抓住伸展到校园里的树枝，像猴儿一样荡进了校园。
Haze weighs down the sky. Winter wind scrapes my bones. I wake up late and run to the school, afraid I'll be punished if I don't make it on time. But the school isn't there. Instead, there's a thick iron gate. I want to go through, but the gate won't budge. I walk around the wall, only to discover that I can't even squeeze through the gap behind the auditorium, because the wall is even higher and sturdier than the gate, and it is topped with barbed wire. The old elm tree is still here, though, outside the wall, and I relax. You thought you could stop me. I climb up the tree and I grab onto a branch hanging over the wall, swinging onto campus like a monkey.
音乐和口号声，循声走进礼堂，看到一群赤裸的青年男女，一边唱歌一边手舞足蹈。难道这就是那个传说中人们永远唱歌跳舞、不知忧愁的地方？对着我的是一个女人的大屁股，我躲在她的身后，裸体女人嘴里不停地喊着什么，弓背弯腰，使劲舞动双臂，打着节拍。两腿之间的阴影就在我的鼻子下面，甚至闻到了她下体的气味。
I follow the sound of music and slogans to the auditorium, where young men and women are dancing and singing and dancing, naked and wild. Ah, this is that place I must have heard of, where everyone is always singing and dancing and cares are unknown. A woman's large buttocks sway before me. I hide behind her body. She's shouting something over and over, her body undulating, keeping the beat with forceful thrusts of her arms. The shadow between her two legs is right under my nose. I can smell her.
面朝我的小伙儿和姑娘们似乎正倾尽全部心力，仰脸望着屋顶，张开双臂，旋转，旋转，再旋转，仿佛他们可以由此升向天空。他们看上去像上了发条的玩偶，既无羞耻也无怨怒，歌唱、舞蹈，不知疲倦。离我最近的是一个瘦高的小伙子，两撇漆黑的眉毛，右眼乌青，下巴有一个抬起，似乎在笑，但那只是面部肌肉的震颤。
The boys and girls before me seemed to be pouring their entire being into their dance. Faces lifted to the ceiling, they spin, spin, spin as if they could rise up to heaven. They are like mechanical dolls, devoid of shame or anger and never tiring. Closest to me is a lanky young man with curving black eyebrows, a bruise on his right eye, and a birthmark on his chin. He seems to be laughing, but no, it's just the quivering of the muscles in his face.
我尽量让自己盯着女人的身体，她们摆动着腰肢，有的纤细，有的臃肿，形态各异的乳房在胸前晃来晃去。突然，有台阶的大哥哥朝我大声喊了起来：“阿奴快逃！阿奴快逃！”我扭头看到一群僵尸一样、面目可憎的男人正站在我的身后。我冲出礼堂，却怎么也够不着那个伸进校园的树枝。僵尸变成了手提长枪的士兵，他们并不上来抓我，狞笑着看我，粗劳地跳啊跳。
I forced myself to look at the bodies of the women, at their swaying hips, at the thin ones, the frail ones, at the obese ones, at their bouncing breasts of every shape and size. Suddenly, the boy with the birthmark calls out to me, "Banu, run away! Banu, run away!" I turn around and I see a group of hideous men standing like zombies right behind me. I burst out of the hall, but I can't reach the branch to climb out. The corpses turn into rifle-toting soldiers, and they are not there to catch me. They grin as they watch me jump helplessly.
我在惊恐中醒来，有片刻功夫不知自己身在何处。看到身边的两个人，才意识到自己正被押解回家，不禁心情黯然起来。到了乌鲁木齐机场，郝如串说：“把你交给辖区民警了，没有什么大事，不用担心，有事可以找我。”说完就朝停车场方向去了。便衣的态度可以说是温和亲切的，这使我感觉十分困惑。难道这是暴风雨前的一场征兆？
I wake up in a panic. For a moment, I don't know where I am. I see my escorts on either side of me, and I remember that I'm being taken home, and a sadness washes over me. When we land in Urumqi, Kebab says he's handing me over to the local police, that I have nothing to worry about. If something comes up, I can find him. With that, we move towards the parking lot. You could say he is cordial, which perplexes me. Is this the calm before the storm? Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Anna and Gülnisa, for this incredible.
Thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you for being
Thank
here.
you, Anna. Annie.
Thank you. Our next pair of readers will be translator Leanne Lockwood Cvetan and author Jonë Zhitia. Leanne Lockwood Cvetan is an Illinois native living in Germany. She has a master's degree in German and works as a freelance literary translator. Jonë was born in 1996 as the daughter of Kosovo Albanian war refugees. She's a writer and journalist in Leipzig and was awarded the 2022 Crespo Foundation's Wortmeldung Prize. Welcome, Leanne and Jonë.
Thank you, Esperanza. Hello, everyone. Thank you also to PEN America for allowing us to be here tonight, or today. for us it's tonight. We're truly delighted to be here. Just as a slight bit of background, I first became aware of Jonõ's essay after seeing the announcement that she had won the prize at the Frankfurt Literaturhaus, where it was awarded, and I immediately felt a connection to her essay, as I am also a foreigner living in a foreign country, and can sympathize with some of the things that she says in the essay. Jonõ's essay is a description of growing up in the shadow of her parents' experience after having fled their homeland of Albania, just as the war was at the threshold. I'll hand the mic over to her to tell us briefly what prompted her to write this piece in the first place, and the one specific word that ties it all together, as she then will open our reading. I hope that you will come to see why she won an award for it. So, Jonë?
Thank you so much, Leanne. So the war was in Kosovo, not Albania, but like the people of Kosovo are called Kosovo Albanians. So it's all a bit confusing. Yeah, I thought like the word the whole essay describes is nadriv, which is, and like Dostoevsky, the Russian author, created it, and actually Ukrainian author, as I've come to know. And he has, for me, perfectly described this feeling of not being able to, on the one side, like this being torn apart on the inside, because on one side, you can never really live up to everything that is expected of you by your family, but also by society, and everyone has like a hold on you and how you have to be and who you are, all basically broken down to where you come from, even though for you that's not the same as maybe for your parents it would be. And I would start the reading, I'm sorry. Nadriv, Sprache fühlen. Bilingual aufwachsen bedeutet nicht, 2 Sprachen zu können. Bilingual aufwachsen bedeutet stetiges Übersetzen. Ein Beispiel zwischen Sprachen. Als ob man einen Gegenstand zwischen den Händen hin und her wirft, um ein Gefühl für ihn zu bekommen. Auf Wikipedia gibt es ein Zitat von Wolf Schmidt. Nadriv ist eine psychoethische Grundsituation in der Welt Dostojewskis, eine überspannte sittliche Haltung, die einer eigentlichen Neigung widerspricht, eine Art pseudo-idealistischer Selbstverleugnung. An den meisten Stellen ist Nadriv am besten mit Selbstvergewaltigung wiederzugeben. Wie sucht man Sprache? Ich war vielleicht 8, als meine Mutter über Danielle Steels Bücher gesprochen hat. So sehr hat sie sich gefunden, dass ich in diesem Alter glaube, Danielle Steel schreibt Bücher über meine Mutter. Ich bin nicht viel älter, als ich anfange, jemanden zu suchen, der über mich schreibt, dessen Worte Spiegel sind, dessen Gedanken mir helfen, die meinen zu ordnen. Nadriv. Die Selbstzerrissenheit, das Zerbrechen am Ideal. Der Kosovo zerbricht an der Erinnerung meiner Mutter. Meine Mutter zerbricht an meinem Deutschsein. Meine Freunde an meinem Albanischsein. Wenn deine Eltern Asylanten waren, illegale Einwanderer, Flüchtlinge, alles, dessen Leben du mit einer Obergrenze für nichtig erklären darfst, ist der Ort, an dem du geboren wurdest, die Erinnerung an die Nichtheimat, an die Nicht-Existenzberechtigung, an das Nicht-Mensch-Genug-Sein. Es gibt Worte, die gehören uns nicht, die unsere Sprache nicht aussprechen kann. Sprache fühlt man. Fühlt man wie vibrierende Autositze, die einen in den Schlaf wiegen. Die Zugehörigkeit entspricht der Heimat, die Zugehörigkeit widerspricht der Andersartigkeit. Andersartigkeit schreibt man sich nicht selbst zu, Andersartigkeit wird zugeschrieben.
Nadriv, Feeling Language, by Zhitia. A bilingual childhood doesn't mean you speak 2 languages. A bilingual childhood means you never cease translating everything, a back and forth between languages, like passing a ball from one hand to the other to get a better feel for it. Wolf Schmidt is quoted on German Wikipedia saying, Nadriv is a basic psychoethical situation in Dostoevsky's world, a masochistic moral attitude that contradicts an actual inclination, a form of pseudo-idealistic self-denial, In most cases, natrav is best to be rendered as self-overpowering. How does someone look for language? I was maybe 8 when my mother first mentioned Danielle Steele's books. She found herself in them so convincingly that I, at that age, think, Danielle Steele writes books about my mother. I'm not much older when I begin to look for someone who writes about me, whose words are like mirrors, whose thoughts help me to sort out my own. Natrav, the inner struggle, the breaking down of perfection. Kosovo clashes with my mother's memory. My mother clashes with my Germanness, my friends with my Albanianness. If your parents were asylum seekers, illegal immigrants, refugees, all of that, whose lives you can have declared invalid by means of some absolute, then is the place where you were born the reminder of that place that is not your homeland, of the disallowance to exist, of not being human enough. There are words that don't belong to us, that our language cannot pronounce. Language is felt, like feeling the vibrations of the car through the seats as they lull you to sleep. Belonging is home. Belonging is the opposite of otherness. Otherness is a label you don't give yourself.
Meine Geschwister und ich spielen auf dem Fußboden und mein Vater schreit uns an oder weint bloß. Er erträgt uns nicht, wie wir da sitzen und spielen. Er fühlt sich schuldig. Seine Kinder sind in Sicherheit, während in seiner Heimat die Kinder reihenweise verhungern, erfrieren oder erschossen werden. Ich weiß nicht, was es bedeutet, ins Exil zu gehen. Ich bin nur in ihm aufgewachsen. Meine Eltern hatten nie vor, hier zu bleiben, aber dann sagten sie irgendwann, als wir die Trümmer sahen, wussten wir, dass unser Land sowieso nicht mehr existiert. In einem Brief 1867 schreibt Dostojewski, dennoch war es schlimm, klar und deutlich zu empfinden, dass es nun einerlei ist, wo ich lebe. Überall bin ich ein losgetrenntes Glied. Meine Eltern sind amputierte Gliedmaßen des Kosovo. Ihre Kinder sind Spenderorgane, die in das falsche Land transplantiert wurden.
My siblings and I play on the floor and my father screams at us or just cries. He can't stand us the way we sit there and play. He feels guilty. His children are safe, while in his homeland the children are starving, freezing, or being shot. I don't know what it's like to go into exile. I only grew up in it. My parents never intended to stay here, but at some point they said, when we saw the ruins, we knew that our country didn't exist anymore anyway. In a letter by Dostoevsky in 1867, he writes, but worse is the clear perception that now I don't in the least care where I may have to dwell. I feel like a slice cut off from the loaf. My parents are amputated extremities of Kosovo. Their children are donated organs, transplanted to the wrong country.
Wer Sprache findet oft auch einen Sprachenschlüssel. Und auf einmal öffnet sich einem diese Sprache, nach der man sich verzehrt, mit der man ausdrücken kann, was schon so lange unausgesprochen ist. Dass es Wurzeln um die Rippen geschlagen hat und seine Pollen die Bronchien verstopfen. Die erste Sprache, die Exilkinder lernen, ist das Schweigen. Sie hat ihre eigenen Vokabeln, die man nicht aufsagt, sondern zu verstummen übt. Sie streckt sich und lässt verschwinden, statt Geschehenen seine Worte zuzuordnen. Es ist eine notwendige Sprache für das Überleben. Das Schweigen ist essentiell, um die Norm nicht zu stören. Odile Kennel hebt ihre Stimme vom Papier und fragt mich, wie kann das Gedicht die Norm zum Sprechen bringen? Ich bin aufgewachsen in einer Wohnung, in der die Böden scharlachrot waren. Es klebte auf den Fliesen, dem Parkett, benetzte die Wände, verdunkelte die Fenster. Scharlach strömte meinem Vater übers Gesicht, als er nach einem Telefonat den Hörer ablegte. Ich weiß noch, wie er auf dem Badewannenrand saß und ich fragte, warum. Und er sagte nur, dass sein Lieblingsverein im Fußball verloren hatte. Er nahm mich in den Arm. Seine nasse Wange an meiner, seitdem ist Scharlach die Farbe meiner Haut. Scharlach war die Farbe, die die Augen meiner Mutter tränkte, wenn wieder der Fernseher lief, in einer Sprache, die ich damals schon angefangen hatte zu verlernen. Scharlach sickerte durch die Glasscheibe, über den Tisch zu uns auf den Boden. Er lief immer zu, der Fernseher. Ich suchte Scharlach, suchte es zuerst bei den anderen. Ich suchte es in ihren Häusern, bei ihren Eltern. Ich suchte in Büchern. Ich suchte die scharlachfarbene Tinte auf scharlachfarbenem Papier. Meistens suchte ich vergebens, aber manchmal war es ähnlich, aber irgendwie nie genau richtig. Scharlach war die Sprache, die wir sprachen. Es war die Sprache der Menschen, die viel zu viele für unsere kleine Sozialwohnung bei uns ein- und aus waren. Sie lachten viel und aßen und erzählten. Doch ihre Münder spückten immer nur Scharlach, Scharlach, Scharlach. Thank you.
Anyone looking for language will often find a language key, and all at once this language opens itself up to you. This language you've yearned for to express what has so long been left unspoken, that its roots had long found purchase around your rib cage, and its pollen choked your lungs. The first language that exile children learn is silence. It has its own vocabulary, not for reciting out loud, but to practice silencing. It reaches out and conceals instead of lending its words to what is happening. It is a language necessary for survival. The silence is essential not to upset the norm. Odile Kennel raises her voice off the paper and asks me, how can the poem get the norm to speak? I grew up in an apartment where the floors were scarlet red. It stuck to the tiles, the parquet, saturated the walls, darkened the windows. Scarlet rushes over my father's face as he places the receiver on the hook after a call. I see him still, sitting on the edge of the bathtub, and I asked why, and he simply said his favorite soccer team had lost. He took me into his arms, his wet cheek against mine. Ever since, the color of my skin is scarlet red. Scarlet was the color that flooded my mother's eyes whenever the television was on again, in a language that back then I had already started to forget. Scarlet seeps through the glass screen, over the table, onto us on the floor. It was always on, the TV. I looked for scarlet. I looked for it first in the others. I looked for it in their houses, in their parents. I looked in books. I looked for the scarlet ink on scarlet-colored paper. Most of the time I looked in vain, but sometimes it was similar, yet somehow never exactly the same. Scarlet was the language we spoke. It was the language of the people, far too many for our tiny subsidized apartment, who were constantly going in and out of our place. They laughed a lot and ate and talked, but what came out of their mouths was only ever scarlet, scarlet, scarlet. Thank you.
Oh, thank you. Thank you, Jonë and Leanne, for a wonderful reading.
Thank you.
Thank you. Our next readers are going to be Jacob Rogers and Berta Dávila. Jacob is a translator of Galician and Spanish. He has received grants from the NEA and Penn Name Funds. Various poems from Las Mujeres No Hablan Así have been published in English in print and online magazines. Berta Dávila is one of the most lauded contemporary Galician writers and has worked in a number of genres, from poetry and adult fiction to children's and young adult literature. Welcome, Jacob and Berta.
Hi, thank you. And thanks everyone for reading and for everyone in attendance. I'm just going to try to give a quick intro to the book and to Berta, and then we'll start our reading. I was trying to write something and I realized that just reading off a listing of her work wouldn't really do justice to, like, she's published a lot of books and she's won awards, but it wouldn't really do justice to her stature in the Galician literary world, but also her impact. Not only does she write in a lot of genres, she's also a publisher and editor and has published some of the most sort of exciting new work in Galician. But on top of that, I think I'm not exaggerating if I say that she's sort of come to be recognized as one of the preeminent novelists in Galicia. She's always pushing her own boundaries. And I think her books have helped reconceive sort of what people expect a Galician novel can be or should be. And the book we'll be reading from today is called The Dear Ones, or Os Seres Queridos, which was her latest book, came out last year. But it was also just published a couple months ago by Three Times Rebel, which is a small press in the UK dedicated to publishing women, but particularly people who write in minority languages. But apparently they're also distributing in the US starting in like October. However, if you don't want to wait because you've heard this reading and you're so excited to buy the book, you should definitely go to their website. They also have some other amazing work from Catalan and Basque, I think Belarusian and Flemish. So yes, maybe save on the shipping and just buy it all. But then as for the book, just to use one of the sentences from the publisher, The Dear Ones is a book about a woman who 5 years after giving birth decides to have an abortion. That's the basic idea, but there are so many threads and preoccupations running throughout the book that it's hard to really sum up succinctly, which is the problem I often have with Berta's work, because she's so good at just sort of patiently, gradually layering her themes and metaphors throughout a book that even while you're sort of reading something and thinking that it's great, by the very end, it sort of becomes something even more, something kind of sublime. And I won't be reading from this part, obviously, but I do think that the last chapter and the last line and page are like some of the best ways to end a book I've ever read. But anyway, with that, I will let Berta read from the Galician.
Thank you. Hello. Thank you very much for the invitation. I'm going to read the beginning of chapter 7 of The Dear Ones, Os Seres Queridos in Galician, as Jacob has just said. O momento máis escuro foi unha noite de sábado, cando o neno xa fixera 9 meses. El xogaba cun submarino de plástico sentado en fráxil equilibrio dentro da bañeira medio encher de auga morna. Mentres aínda saía a auga da billa, deixei caer un fío de champú infantil para que se formasen burbullas. Quería sorprendelo.
My darkest moment came on so she said, she probably said it in English. We're reading from chapter 7, sorry. My darkest moment came on a Saturday night when the boy was 9 months old. He was playing with a plastic submarine and sitting delicately balanced in the bath, which was half filled with hot water. While it continued to fill, I squirted some children's shampoo into the tub to make it a bubble bath. I wanted to surprise him.
O neno recibiu cada pompa de xabón con exclamacións inintelixibles e ficou tamén pasmado coas ondulacións da auga. Había no seu xesto asombrado unha emoción que eu non era quen de compartir. A alegría do meu fillo deixaba en min un pouso de soidade, que era distinta a calquera outra clase de soidade que eu experimentase antes de ser nai. Parecíame todo docemente trivial e tamén, de algunha maneira, terrible.
The boy welcomed each squirt of shampoo with unintelligible exclamations, and he was awestruck by the waves in the water. There was, in his expression of wonderment, an excitement that I couldn't share. My son's enjoyment left me with a drop of solitude, one that was different to any form of solitude I'd experienced before becoming a mother. Everything felt quietly trivial and also somehow terrible.
O neno era fermoso como a calquera bebé. Con todo, non era especial, nin tan fermoso como parece nas fotografías. O seu cabelo comezou a caer por partes o pouco de nacer e volveuse difícil de acomodar. En varias zonas da cabeza non había pelo en absoluto. Os seus ruídos non sempre eran encantadores, e a súa cara conxestionábase con cada esforzo. Tiña sempre ese aspecto de criatura, esa condición de animal que me atemorizaba un pouco. O seu ánimo adoitaba oscilar entre o desmedido entusiasmo por un acontecemento absolutamente vulgar, como a sombra dos seus propios pés, e o enfado ante case calquera circunstancia que por causa descoñecida lle resultase molesta. Moitas veces eu pensaba que aquel feito trascendental de converterme en nai non era nada extraordinario e que se cadra non era culpa miña. Se cadra, aquel fillo era incapaz de convocar en min esas emocións primitivas, case máxicas, que os outros fillos lles provocaban ás outras nais.
The boy was as beautiful as any baby. He wasn't special, though, nor was he as beautiful as he looks in photos. His hair started to fall out in patches not long after he was born, and he had a hard time keeping it. There was no hair at all on some parts of his head. The noises he made weren't always pleasant, and his face would scrunch up at the slightest physical effort. There was always something creature-like about him, an animal quality I found a bit frightening. His moods oscillated between unbridled enthusiasm for an utterly commonplace occurrence, the shadow of his own feet, and rage at basically any circumstance that bothered him, whatever the reason. There were many times when I thought that there was nothing extraordinary in the transcendental fact of me becoming a mother, and that maybe it wasn't my fault. Maybe the boy wasn't capable of awakening in me the same primitive, almost magical emotions that other children awoke in their mothers.
Calquera pequena rabuñadura fortuita que o neno sufría ao vestilo, co bordo mal limado dunha das miñas unllas, ou tras levar autónomamente un xoguete con esquinas ata a súa boca pequena, facíame sentir culpable, como se fose responsable en todo momento da preservación dun organismo vivo de milagre e, ademais, como se non fose nada meu e por iso non tivese dereito a estragalo. Todo o que o meu fillo modificara, non soamente as rutinas, senón en especial os significados das cousas triviais, actuaba sobre min igual que unha película delgada que me conservase prisioneira no interior dunha pompa de xabón irrompible. Non porque non puidese romperse, senón porque non debía, en ningunha circunstancia, nin sequera se a circunstancia era que eu así o desexase. Ao mirar o neno na auga, mollado e brillante, mentres mergullaba o submarino de plástico ata o fondo da bañeira para festexar que o xoguete volvese a emerxer de inmediato, imaginei que os meus dedos eran finos como agullas, e tamén agudos e punxentes, e que con eles facía estalar a quebradiza armonía da nova vida doméstica, que desaparecía no aire cun estalido discreto, como se fose unha ilusión que nunca existira.
Any minor accidental scratch inflicted on the boy by the unevenly filed edges of my nails while I dressed him, or when he robotically brought a toy with sharp corners up to his small mouth, made me feel guilty, as if I was, at every moment, responsible for the preservation of a being that was alive by a miracle, and on top of that, as if he didn't belong to me and I had no right to mess up. All the things my son modified, not just routines, but also, especially, the meanings of trivial things, acted upon me like a thin surface that imprisoned me inside an unpoppable soap bubble. Not because it couldn't be popped, but because it shouldn't be, but in any circumstances, even if the circumstance was that it was what I wanted. When I looked at the boy in the water, damp and shiny, while he sunk his plastic submarine to the bottom of the bathtub, only to celebrate its immediate return to the surface, I imagined my fingers as thin as needles, sharp and pointy, that would burst the fragile harmony of our new domestic life, causing it to dissipate with a discreet pop, like a mirage that had never really been there.
A beleza do neno era incontestable. O neno era susceptible de sufrir calquera tipo de accidente fortuito, calquera enfermidade mortal. O neno non podía defenderse de nada, tampouco de min. Saqueino da bañeira e arroupeino cunha toalla estampada con parrulos amarelos de mirada perdida. Acariñeino máis ca outros días. Puxenlle despois crema hidratante por todo o corpo, paseille un peite de goma pola cabeza, por veces secarlle o pelo con 2 xestos rápidos coa propia toalla, como adoitaba. E despois, seco e lustroso, fragante a colonia infantil dentro dun pixama limpo, dello a Miguel como se fose un paquete, e ele encargouse de prepararlle o último biberón do día e de deitalo. Eu deiteime tamén, cubrín a cabeza co edredón, finxín que estaba enferma e que non quería cear nada. Seguramente o estaba, porque sempre sentía un alevedor de estómago e outros síntomas de malestar parecidos. Apaguei a luz e fiquei esperta durante varias horas en silencio.
The boy's fragility was unquestionable. He was liable to stumble into any sort of accident, any sort of mortal illness, and couldn't defend himself from anything, including me. I plucked him out from the tub and wrapped him in a towel printed with ducks that had a distant look in their eyes. I gave him more physical affection than most days. Then I lathered his body in lotion. I ran a comb through his hair instead of drying it with 2 brusque shakes of the towel, as I usually did. And then, shiny, dry, and fragrant with children's soap in a clean pair of pajamas, I handed him over to Miguel like a package. He took over preparing the boy's last bottle of the day and putting him to bed. I put myself to bed too, covering my head with a duvet and pretending that I was sick and didn't feel like eating dinner. I'm sure I was, because I always felt a slight pain in my stomach, another similar symptom. I turned off the light and lay awake for hours in silence.
Esa noite tiven a impresión de non ser quen de pechar e abrir os ollos de xeito involuntario, de ter que meditar cada pestanexo. Tamén me pareceu que se os pechaba podía perderme nunha caída libre e escura dentro dos meus propios pensamentos. Algúnas veces, naquel tempo, estaba convencida de que o meu corpo perdera a capacidade para calquera acción automática e con frecuencia, sobre todo no final do día, non era quen de tragar alimentos sólidos en percibir que afogaría con cada bocado, por pequeno que fose. Deitada na cama, imaginei que se apertaba suficientemente os puños sería posible desaparecer, e daquela aperteinos ata facerme marcas das unllas na palma das mans. Imaginei tamén que o meu corazón deixaba de latexar dun momento a outro ou que un coágulo de sangue ficaba atascado na miña cabeza. E sentín algo parecido ao alivio por pensar todas esas cousas, algo parecido ao consolo.
That night, I felt like I couldn't involuntarily open and close my eyes, like I had to work for every blink. It also felt like if I did close them, I could lose myself in a pitch-black freefall through my own thoughts. There were times back then when I was convinced my body had lost its capacity for any automatic action. And often, especially at the end of the day, I couldn't get down solid foods without feeling like I was going to choke on every bite, no matter how small. As I lay in bed, I imagined that if I clenched my fists hard enough, I might simply be able to disappear. And I clenched them so hard that I left nail marks in my palms. I also imagined that my heart would stop beating from one moment to the next, or that a blood clot was forming in my brain. And these thoughts brought me something akin to relief, something akin to comfort. That's all. Thank you all for listening.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Jacob and Berta, for this wonderful reading. Our last readers are going to be Susanna Lang and Souad Labbize. Susanna Lang's translation of Souad Labbize's poems, My Soul Has No Corners, is forthcoming from Diálogos. Her chapbook of original poems, like this, appeared this year from Unsolicited Books. My Soul Has No Corners is Souad Labbize's first book-length selection in English. It brings together two of the collections she has published in France. So I'll let Susanna carry on.
Hello, and thank you to PEN for organizing this event. Thank you especially to Esperanza, not only for moderating, but for facilitating our participation. Unfortunately, Souad she's in Morocco for a conference, and she had arranged with the organizers not to be presenting during this reading, and they put her on very close to this time. She was still hoping to join us, and I hope maybe she still will be able to, but I will at any rate begin. So Souad Labbize was born in Algeria. She also lived for 12 years in Tunisia and did not feel that as a leaving home, because Algeria and Tunisia are both part of the Maghreb, that part of North Africa, which overall feels to her like home. But as a lesbian and as an outspoken feminist, she was at risk in Tunisia under a repressive government, and therefore crossed the Mediterranean to live in France, now lives in lived there and has French citizenship. She has never felt that France made a home for her, and so she experiences her time there as an exile and feels called to speak for others who are forced to leave home and to live in exile. This book, as Esperanza, My Soul Has No Corners, has two sections. The first section is poems from Brouillons Amoureux, Drafts of Love, which is a collection of linked love poems to a woman who, with whom the relationship did not, in the end, work out. I will at least start by reading in both languages, the French first and then the English. None of these poems are titled. Grammaire amoureuse, dont je pense à toi, je ne suis pas le sujet de la phrase. A loving grammar, when I say, I'm thinking of you, I am not the subject of the sentence. J'ai plié mon cœur avant le rendez-vous dans la boîte de la nouvelle chemise. Après le rendez-vous, j'ai fait une lessive. La chemise a rétréci et mon cœur avec. Before we met, I folded my heart into the narrow pocket of a new shirt. After we met, I put my shirt in the wash. It shrank, and with it, my heart. Grossefin en pensant au goût de l'amour perdu, j'ai mis à chauffer le reste de soupe aux légumes de mai. J'avais la flemme de préparer un couscous. La pluie taquinait les plantes derrière la buée de la vitre. Je pensais à tous les retards, le tien, le printemps, l'amour, les légumes de printemps. La pluie n'a pas fait attention au désordre de mes pensées. Quand la buée s'est épaissie, je me suis souvenu de ma grosse faim. I was so hungry, thinking how love used to taste. I turned on the stove to warm the leftover soup made with vegetables. I didn't have the energy to make a couscous. Rain teased the plants outside the foggy window. I thought of all that's been delayed. You, spring, love, spring vegetables. The rain paid no attention to my chaotic thoughts. When the fog thickened, I remembered my great hunger. The second section of this collection is Baluchon d'Exil, Bindle of Exile. It's the first part of the larger collection, Je franchis les barbelés, Crossing Barbed Wire, winner of the 2020 Prix de la Métainerie de la Poésie. And she was thinking very much of Syrian refugees as she was writing many of these poems. So a couple of words I wanted to talk about before I start. Bindle is an archaic word in English. Baluchon is an archaic word in French. Think of the 1930s pictures of hobos with all their belongings in a bandana tied to a pole over the shoulder, and that is a baluchon. Also, the word soles in this poem refers to the soles of your shoes, but in the title poem of the book, it's the sole inside you. Dans le mot exil, il y a une paire de semelles qui ne se parlent plus, un baluchon plié en haut du placard, un boussole rongé de remords, un dictionnaire bilingue qui dit peu de choses de l'exil, juste assez pour cacher sa douleur. Des semelles, un baluchon, une boussole qui ne rentre pas dans la traduction du mot exil. Une boussole, des semelles, un baluchon qui ne rêve plus du droit au retour. In the word exile, a pair of souls that no longer speak to each other, a bindle folded away on the top shelf of a closet, a compass rusty with remorse, a bilingual dictionary that doesn't say much about exile, just enough to hide its pain. Two souls, a bindle, a compass that do not enter into the translation of the word exile. A compass, two souls, a bindle that no longer dream of the right of return. This is the title poem of the English collection, And here, soul is indeed the interior soul. Mon âme n'a pas de coin. Quand j'y reviens, les bras chargés de nouveaux chagrins, je ne trouve nulle part ce qui peut ressembler à un coin de table ou prendre un goûter à côté d'une paire de mains qui écasse des petits pois. Mon âme, je ne sais pas qui l'a conçue. Un architecte qui croit aux vertus séculaires des maisons d'âme où il n'y a pas de place, un seul coin. My soul has no corners. When I return with an armload of new grief, I can't find anything like the corner of a table where I could have a snack next to a pair of hands shelling peas. I don't know who conceived my soul, an architect who believes in the circular virtues of soul houses, without room for a single corner. I'm sure you know that tricolor refers to the French flag with its red, white, and blue stripes. Ne comptez pas sur mon petit balcon par ce temps humide. La lessive d'une semaine tarde à sécher. Il n'y a pas de place. Futur tricolore, laver les vieux drapeaux est affaire de la bandière, veuve de soldats inconnus. Celles que je connais sont mortes de chagrin. Don't count on my small balcony in this humid weather. The week's wash dries slowly. There's no room for another sheet, even tricolor. I don't know what soap could do the job. Washing old flags is a job for washerwomen, widows of unknown soldiers. The ones I know died of heartbreak over a washboard. And this is the last and very short poem in the collection, and it's one of the ones I had the most trouble translating. In French, it starts out, J'ai des rêves de mailles serrées, which is literally, I have dreams of tight knots in a rug. But Souad did not want the word dreams in there. She said that she really felt like those tight knots suffocated and stifled in the society where she found herself. J'ai des rêves de mailles serrées d'un tapis nouément qu'on oublie de secouer. I am the strands knotted too tightly in a rug woven by hand that no one has remembered to shake out. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Susanna. It's a fitting way to end our reading, I would say, with the words that no one has remembered to shake out. I wish Souad would have been with us, but you certainly rendered her poetry beautifully. And so we have a little bit of time for questions, and I would like to start asking all of you two questions, one for the translator and one for the author. Now, Leanne already sort of introduced this topic, which was what made you choose this translator? What obviously, I mean, it's a little bit of a falling in love, I would say, right? You fall in love with someone's work, someone's words, what they're expressing. There has to be some sort of passion about what they're expressing that you actually want to bring to in this case, the English-speaking world. How did it happen for you? I know Leanne said she had not met in person. Am I correct? Or was it Anne? Anne was the one who said. I don't know if you each will go through and tell us a little bit about, even though Leanne has said a little bit about it and Anne too, but I'd like to hear, how did you discover this author? When did you discover them? If you can tell us what made you want to go to them and reach out? And for the author's part, what made you decide to take this risk with this translator? Maybe you had met them before, maybe you hadn't, but it's a relationship, it's a collaboration, it's a very special and interesting rapport that actually brings what we have tonight and today. So I would like to hear from each one of you if you're willing to share with us, and whoever wants to start first. And if you have other questions, anyone else, please jump in.
I'm happy to start.
Thank you.
I fell in love with Gemma Gorga's prose poems that I found in an anthology of 6 Catalan poets. And again, here's women in translation. She was the only woman in the anthology. And there were several of these prose poems. That was the first book, Book of Minutes. And I wanted to read all of them. There were 60 of them. It was a kind of diminutive book of hours, and playing on the minutes into you could read the book in an hour. And it was love and chutzpah, because at the time I didn't know any Catalan. I knew Spanish, Italian, some French, and I'm still far from fluent and have had to rely on people who are fluent, and Gemma has been very kind with me. I just said, love and chutzpah, I have to translate, I have to read them. And that was the only way I could read the poems, was by translating them. And I wrote to her, and this was about 2013, 2014. And I said, how would you feel? And she said, okay. And I thought it would be so easy. And of course, it was so difficult.
Thank you, Sharon, for starting. Gemma, do you want to say how you felt about it when Sharon reached out to you?
Yeah, sure. Actually, I was chosen, so I had nothing to say apart from thank you, and I just felt gratitude, because Sharon wanted so clearly to translate those poems that, of course, I tried to help her in any way I could, but she did very well, and I always tell her that she was such a faithful and respectful translator, which is all that an author can dream of.
Beautiful, thank you. Anyone else who wants to go next?
Excuse me, I'm happy to go next. I guess we're going in order of reading now. So I was connected with Gülnisa through a mutual writer friend who, and I apologize for the sound, I'm at my school right now, but Tang Dan Hong is an author whose work I read at my previous non-school job, and I really wanted to bring some of Dan Hong's work into English. And then when Dan Hong was connected with Gülnisa and shared her manuscript with me, I wanted to be a part of this. And I just wanted to also thank Gülnisa for taking a big risk with me, because I am one of the emerging translators on this panel. I've published a few essays and poems in translation, but this is the first book-length work that I'm working on. So give me a moment to tell Gülnisa what I just said, and then she will respond. 我就说我们怎么认识，然后我怎么决定要给你做巴努的这个翻译。就说我以前跟当红做了一些什么，然后他是我们的朋友吧。然后也感谢你，因为我刚开始，我还没做出来一本书的全部翻译，所以我就不知道结果会怎么样，所以就感谢你。然后就麻烦你给大家说你为什么要我给你做翻译？
好的，就像刚才你说的那样，这是你翻译了丹红的作品。我的爱人呢是语言学家，他跟我说呀，你的翻译非常的好，风格非常灵巧优雅，所以呢，我就说，丹红的推荐是没错的，丹红的推荐是没错的，我觉得我耐心等待也是值得的。中国有句俗话说，慢工出细活嘛，所以呢，我觉得你的活儿 干得慢一点，做得慢一点没有关系。我们等待最后的结果，有耐心，谢谢。
So just the same that Gülnisa got connected to me through Danhong, and that actually her husband had read the translations I made of Danhong's work and thought that I was very suitable, and that Gülnisa mentioned this, that it's a long process because this is something that I'm new to and that I'm doing while I have a full-time job, but that she feels that it's worth it to wait for me to slowly give her one chapter at a time.
That's wonderful. And I get the feeling that you didn't translate everything, because I'm sure I got the feeling she was praising you and thanking you deeply. That was my feeling, but you know, but we are all grateful to the translators as writers and as translators to the writers. So how about you, Leanne? Would you like to add anything else?
Yeah, for me it was I've published some books that were all self-publishers. I'm not in with any publishing houses here in Germany or in the States, not for lack of trying, but for me it was kind of, I was looking for something modern, something that was, you know, like today, and just doing a usual, you know, my usual search of a couple of different websites. One of them was the Frankfurt Literaturhaus, that has active readings and authors and everything else, and I just happened to stumble upon her text, and I read it, and I could feel, I could sympathize with her and the things that she said, being also a foreigner in a foreign country and often feeling very foreign, even though a lot of times I do fit in, but at other times even just simply not understanding certain little things. And so I could feel both what her parents were feeling and what she was feeling as a child, because I also have kids of my own. And so it's kind of this balancing act of fitting in and still keeping my identity as an American. Yeah. Yeah, so then I reached out to her and asked if she was interested. I had just planned to send, since hers is an essay, I had just planned to translate it and to send it off to a couple of literary journals. And then I saw this and thought it would be perfect, especially with the topic of exile. And yeah, and that's how we ended up here. And of course I wrote to her and she was all gung-ho and, you know, exciting and adventurous, and so that's how we ended up here.
Thank you. Does Jonë want to say anything or no?
She actually just wrote to me that she had to step out for a minute, so she's probably not there yet.
Okay, so we'll go on to Jacob and to Berta. Tell us about your experience, please.
I don't know the timeline really, but at some point, however many years ago, I think I read her first novel, which is like a crazy, it's set in South Dakota about people from like South Dakota. It's got nothing to do with Galicia, which is the exact sort of thing that I love. Also, I've had family from the Midwest, and I was like, yeah, this is pretty accurate. This feels but anyway, so nothing happened then. There was already like a sample of that book, and I just sort of admired it from afar. And then she published another novel, Carousel. And I don't know, at some point after that came out, I had reached out, maybe during the pandemic, about translating a bit, and she was very nice and was like, why not? Go ahead. And then she's since released another novel, and then this other novel that I just read from, and so by the time this new one came out, I was already working with her a lot, and her agent was like, do you want to do a sample? And you know, happily ever after on that one. So that was kind of easy in that sense. But yeah, I've just always really loved her work. And so it's nice with Galicia because when I work with Spanish authors, it tends to be a bit more like through agencies, and it's a little bit more sterile, like because I don't really speak to them. But with Galicia, like I talk to the author, and so like I feel a little bit less, feels kind of gross when I don't even know, I've never even like emailed the author and I'm just like working on their stuff. But like, so like talking to Berta and like working on it together and like asking questions and going back and forth has always been really nice.
That's wonderful. Berta, what do you want to tell us? You could say it in Spanish.
Sí, si quieres falar en galego, pero estás silenciada.
Ok, ahora? Vale. Para mí foi sempre interesante traballar con Jacob, de feito, é sempre interesante responder, digamos, esas dudas que él sempre plantea como pedindo desculpas, non? Como estas larguísimas dudas para min sempre é moi interesante e é un placer tamén saber que cos meus textos traballa unha persoa que se preocupa realmente polas palabras ou polas palabras que parecen artefactos moi sinxelos, pero que pode que teñan un montón de ambigüidades e trampas, non? Foi sempre un placer traballar con Jacob, tanto con esta novela como con outro conto que escribín o ano pasado e que foi fantástico que el puidese traducir. Entón, bueno, para min é unha garantía poder traballar con un traductor que coñeces, co que podes conversar. Tivemos a oportunidade de coñecernos persoalmente a pasada primavera, gracias a unha beca de residencia para traductores que obtivo Jacob aquí en Galicia. Entón, bueno, sempre é un intercambio interesante e moi grato, ademais, personalmente.
Thank you. Jacob,
Just trying to type all that. She said she's never met me. She doesn't know who I am. Sorry, I'm gonna go back to my notes. She said, it's just always fun. Like I send these like questions and I'm always apologizing because they're like, oh, these are such long questions, but just like finding it interesting to just sort of get these questions about your own work and like think through like word choices that maybe aren't like just sort of realizing like all the little things that might happen with word choices that you aren't thinking about, especially like when you're changing languages. But and yeah, so we got to meet actually this year in spring. I was on a residency in Galicia for like a month and I was translating one of her other novels, so we got to meet a few times and like do a talk. And we also were working on a story last year. She said that is going to be her new novel that was published in Spanish Granta last year for Frankfurt. So hopefully more to come soon. She didn't say that part, but I said that part.
Wonderful. That's the art of translation, right? You can leave out some of the praise and then that's coming soon. Yeah. What about you, Susanna?
I'm in awe of Anne because I stopped translating when I was teaching full-time. I don't know how she does that. And 4 years ago, I was getting back into it because I had gone down to part-time work as a teacher and walked into a bookstore in Nice and told the bookseller what I was looking for, someone to translate. I had started as a very young woman translating Yves Bonnefoy, and I wanted a woman, and I wanted someone a little younger, although it was really a miraculous experience to work with Yves. But so she pulled out a bunch of books, but she specially praised Souad's love poems in Brillants Amoureux. Souad had given a reading in this bookstore not long before. And I read them on the train on the way up to Paris and really fell in love with them. And did a sample, sent it off to her. It was a bilingual edition in Arabic and French. And so I got to work with another translator, Kay Heikkinen, who translates from Arabic into English, but also has a PhD in French. So she was the most perfect collaborator to help me with these poems. And then, I thought that it's like 27 poems, if I remember correctly, something like that. And for us in the United States, that's a chapbook. And it's harder to find a publisher for a chapbook. So I was looking for other texts that I could put with that, and it would show more the breadth of her work. And that's why I landed on this next book, which had not come out when I was first reading her work. And took, since it neatly divided into two very different sections, was able to take one section and make something more like a full-length collection for her. And I've since done another group of love poems that's sort of between a chapbook and a full length for us. And that one, I think, is coming out in late 2024, early 2025 in a bilingual edition in France with a regular publisher, Éditions des Lisières, and Words Without Borders just published a couple of those poems. Working with her has been really good. We have a very collaborative relationship. I was just in Toulouse a few months ago working on that most recent manuscript, and it was really magical. When we finished going through my questions and so forth, we read it aloud. She read the French and I read the English all the way through, stopping to talk about, where we could hear something that needed to be worked on. And it just felt like something very special to be able to do that.
Thank you, Susanna. Anyone else? Jonë, would you like to say anything? You had stepped out for a minute, but Leanne spoke. But if you wanted to say anything about how you mentioned it earlier about how when she approached you, you said yes, go ahead and translate my work, and you've been working together on this essay and beyond, right?
Yeah, I was so excited for, especially like there's the poem Scarlet in the essay, and I was really excited for it to be translated in English, because the problem with the word scarlet, I had, when I was 16, looked up a word for blood red, and in German the word scarlet translates to Scharlach. But the problem with that word is that it's not used in common German language. It only is used for the disease scarlet fever. So when I first wrote it, but I didn't know this. So when I first wrote it, everybody was really, really confused, because they were like, what does that? Was this a thing? Was that sickness a thing in your family? What happened? And nobody understood it. And so it felt to me like when Leanne translated it into English, it fell into place for the first time properly. Like, while I find translation of poetry usually always, I'm always so impressed when I find good poetry translations, because I have so much respect for people who do that. And this was like, oh, this is how this poem is supposed to sound like. And that was I did not expect that to happen.
Oh,
that's wonderful. That's fantastic. Yeah, beautiful. Marianne wants to make a comment and pose a question. Please, Marianne.
Thank you, Esperanza, and thank all of you. I wanted to make a comment about the curation to begin with, because it's very subtle, but of course, having posed the question of exile and found all of you writers, I think it exemplifies the purpose of the Women in Translation reading, because I'm going to borrow from a concept they use a lot in Catalan, which is to say Catalan is not a minority language or a minority culture, but minoritized by the general vision of languages that are not French, German, English, Russian, etc. And I think, having a series of writers who have talked about either minoritized experiences or, well, in general, minoritized experiences, it contributes to decentering literature and to taking the things from the center that are usually there and re-centralizing a different kind of experience. And it was very subtle. And I knew what it was about when I started, but having heard all of you, it really came to life. The second thing that I wanted to say was about the listening to the languages side by side, which is another really important part of this series. And you know, the beauty of hearing the rhythm of the original language and then how the translator has rendered that in the target language is really extraordinary. And I wanted to ask the writers, if you hadn't heard it before, I see Susanna says that you did read through everything, but no. I don't know why Siri decided I was asking her something. But I'd like to know if what happens to you, what do you think as writers when you hear the translation? And to the translators, do you get any new insights when you hear both being read, when you hear your translation in the context of the author reading?
Who wants to go first?
Maybe too hard. It may be a hard question. But do you get any new insight into the text when you hear it read? And do the authors learn anything about the text when you hear the translation read?
We did have the experience, Souad and I, that particularly on the most recent manuscript, not what I was reading, that she felt after hearing me read the translation that she needed to clarify the French. That there was a reason I had translated that way, even though it wasn't what she had intended. And I certainly get a lot from hearing her read, but I always find that reading aloud, and in my own writing as well, is a revision strategy that's really central to my practice.
Thank you. Anyone else? Would anyone else like to? Okay, please go ahead, Jonë.
I was just thinking about, while translating the essay, Leanne at some point asked me about one sentence in the essay, which we didn't read aloud. And in German, it goes like, Heimat ist eine Funktion der Immobilienpreise, which was really hard to translate because it's like, it means that home is what did we say? A function of, a function
is a function of the real estate prices. Home is a function of the real estate prices. And
she asked me that.
Yeah, go ahead.
She asked me that because there was a video of a recording of me reading this essay, and she asked, why are the people in the audience laughing? And I answered her, I have no idea. I was asking myself the same question. And it turned out that the author, because that is a quote, and the author of that quote was the one laughing in the audience. And I sent him an email, and I asked him, like, why were you laughing? This is not, I think it's tragic. And he's like, no, it's hilarious. And I found that while, like, the way we, like, translated, like, every time she asked me something, I found closer, maybe that was, like, I thought I was closer to, or had to become closer to the original text. And while she was reading, I got really emotional. And I'm so afraid this sounds conceited, but, like, hearing her speak my text in her language, so to speak, gave it, like, you know, it makes you really understand that when you write something, it's not into the abyss, even though very often it feels like that. But, like, people can actually connect to it. Like, people can translate it into their own. And that made me really emotional, and it felt really special.
Thanks. Yeah, and I find when I listening to her read it in German. I find that very often the German is kind of, it's maybe it's just me in my emotions, but when I have it in English, I can really target in on the emotions of it and kind of pull out the really harshness of it. And I think that maybe because she's the author, it's just so normal for her, and it's just every day, you know, but from somebody looking in on it to say, hey, that's really harsh. It's really a kind of, you know, some hard knocks in that text. And I think I like to think that I'm, you know, pulling out these bits that are so like right there.
Thank you. That was an excellent question, Marianne, and excellent answers that really get to the heart of the job of the translator, who's first and foremost a reader, and then a translator for other readers. And it's very special what translators and authors do when they collaborate, in, you know, as we know. I believe it's time to wrap it up. Aliyah, if there are any questions that are pressing, certainly I don't want to ignore those, but I believe we have until about 2:30 our Eastern Standard Time, which is, it's 2:31 right now, our time. So unless someone has, she said no questions from, okay, attendees. So I believe it's time to let you all go and relax and think about everything we discussed today. It's been a pleasure and an honor to be moderating this panel with you. And thank you so much for your writing, for your translating, and for being here. And I cannot tell you how important this has been for me. And I hope we all take something away with us that we can think about for a long time. And I hope to see you again, whether on Zoom or in person one day. And thank you for your work. Truly appreciate it.
Thank you, Esperanza. You were a great moderator.
Thank you, Marianne.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Thank you so
you.
much.
And
Thank
to
you.
Nancy and Catherine and Esperanza for the curation, which was really stunning, and all the writers.
Thank you very much. Bella.